Of course, if you're joining myself as well as State Representative Doreen Carter this evening, it is because there has been concern expressed by the community and requests for updates on the ongoing efforts that are associated with the Walden Pond community. So this evening, we will be providing those updates. We will begin with, of course, the history of Walden Pond. Of course, I became familiar with Walden Pond in 2018 while initially seeking office. We have seen it in the news. If you have ever visited Walden Pond, you understand the concern that we all have. And I'm going to begin with an introduction of our speakers this evening to shed light on the history of Walden Pond, as well as the efforts that have been undertaken from a legal perspective over the years. We have with us this evening attorney Terry Phillips. And if we can begin with showing each side, Allison. Actually, let's begin with Representative Doreen Carter. Good. Okay, we'll go with State Representative Doreen Carter first. And of course, she is a Georgia State Representative for House District 92, referred to as the Chief Community Officer. Representative Carter is known for her unwavering support of East Metro area and for identifying opportunities to improve the lives of residents as well as businesses within her district. She is an effective leader who advocates for vibrant communities and has a strong interest in education, economic development, public safety, and she also serves as chair of the East Metro DeKalb CID Formation Committee, which is the first community improvement district in South DeKalb. She is a Leadership DeKalb alumni, past president of Greater Lithonia Chamber of Commerce, and currently serves on the Brownfield Revolving Loan Fund Committee. Representative Carter is an accountant by trade and owns a financial education company. In November of 2015, Doreen was elected to serve as the state representative for House District 92, which includes Rockdale County and the southernmost part of DeKalb County, include a portion of the city of Stonecrest. In spring of 2022, she announced her candidacy for House District 93, including counties Newton, Rockdale, and DeKalb. She is a member of the following House committees: Code Revision, Education, Industry and Labor, Small Business Development, and Special Rules. Additionally, Representative Carter was elected by her peers to serve as the treasurer of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus and was awarded Freshman Legislator of the Year. She resides in Lithonia, Georgia with her 3 sons. And thank you so much, Representative Carter, for actually calling for this meeting to have this conversation. Next, we have with us this evening, Mr. Tim Hardy. Mr. Hardy is the Director of DeKalb County Code Compliance. He serves as Deputy Director of Beautification over Code Compliance and has 2 decades of code enforcement experience. Prior to joining DeKalb County, Hardy worked as the lead marshal for the City of Smyrna's Code Enforcement Division and a code enforcement officer in Sandy Springs, Georgia from 2009 to 2011. In addition, he served as Atlanta's Director of Bureau of Code Compliance from 2006 to 2008, as well as an employee with Fulton County's Code Enforcement Division from 1998 to 2006. Thank you so much, Mr. Hardy, for your service, and thank you for taking the time out to join us this evening. Next, we have with us attorney Terry Phillips. He is, of course, an attorney with DeKalb County, Georgia. Terry is a deputy county attorney in the DeKalb County Law Department, where he provides advice and counsel to county departments and officials, including the Chief Executive Office, Board of Commissioners, Public Safety, human resources, and purchasing and contracting. His practice includes litigation, negotiation, training staff, and drafting a variety of legal documents, including pleadings, briefs, legal opinions, ordinances, resolutions, policies, procedures, and contracts. He has studied constitutional interpretation under United Supreme Court Justice Ackman. And of course, that was in France. I cannot pronounce the very long name of the school, Attorney Phillips, where he was appointed to the Westmoreland American Inn of Court for his outstanding performance in trial advocacy. He has earned certification as a public purchasing officer by the National Institute of Government Procurement and a certified contract compliance officer from the American Contract Compliance Association. His associations include serving as a State Bar of Georgia unlicensed practice of law District 4 committee member, DeKalb Bar Association Board of Directors and President, DeKalb Lawyers Association Board of Directors and President, and Leadership DeKalb. He's also served as a consultant and volunteer to several nonprofit organizations, including the United Way of Metropolitan Atlanta, the DeKalb County Chiefs Association, Inc., and DeKalb County's PALS Plus since 2010. He's also served as an adjunct professor at Strayer University. Thank you, Attorney Phillips, for all you do, and thank you for often working with me on resolutions and ordinances. This evening, we will begin with you, Attorney Phillips, but before we do, as a co-host of this town hall, I would like to give State Representative Doreen Carter the opportunity to address the audience, and thereafter, Mr. Phillips, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I really appreciate you coordinating this meeting this evening to give our constituents an update. As she said, I'm State Representative Doreen Carter, and I received a call a few months back about Walden Pond, and we started asking questions, and the first name that came up was Commissioner Lorraine Cochran-Johnson, because what the message was, she has been working diligently. So I wanted to be able to share that and say thank you. For me, this is in my district, and it became another environmental issue in that particular corridor. So I thought it was very important that we begin to address this issue, because we didn't want to have the residents there think that we weren't thinking about them. But as I began to dig and get more information, I learned that there was a lot of work that had gone forth, and there had been some updates. And I had an opportunity to also speak with the CEO, who also shared that he knew about it. He, the team is working, and shared with me some recent activity. And I know we'll talk about those tonight. So I just want to say thank you to Attorney Phillips, Mr. Hardy, for all that you all do. And Mr. Hardy, I know you took the time talking to me. He was like, who is this lady? And I really appreciate that. And thank you to your team. Commissioner, you have an amazing team. And for those of you out there, I appreciate everything that you do. And I hope that you'll see tonight that we all collectively work really hard in trying to ensure that we improve the lives of our community. So I hope that all of your answers, all of your questions will be answered tonight. And those that we can't answer, just know that we will be working on getting those answers. So again, thank you, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, for organizing. I thought it was bugging you so much. I really appreciate it. But this is what we do. We work together. So thank you.
You are welcome. That said, yes, that's what we do. And, I'm concerned, let me be clear. I think that I speak for Representative Carter as well. We're concerned with what the people of DeKalb are concerned about. I remember when I stumbled across Walden Pond, I honestly couldn't believe what I saw. And that was in 2018, probably around April or May, while running for office. And after taking office, I remember we demolished 5 buildings. but I too feel that it falls short of what's needed there. But I'm now going to turn over the floor to Mr. Phillips so you can give us, the history of the litigation, bring us through the most current legislation that's just a few months old now. And thereafter, we will speak with Mr. Hardy because the issues associated with Walden Pond are ongoing. So Attorney Phillips, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson and State Representative Carter, and all the members of the public who have expressed an interest in this community. I'd like to give you an abbreviated history because there is a voluminous history in dealing with the problems at Walden Pond and community problems associated with the condo itself. And where you started, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, is probably a good place to start, and that's 2018. 2018, 2019, thereabouts, I understand code compliance had a number of issues that they worked to address by issuing warnings and citations in the community. That effort went on consistently, and ultimately they took the extraordinary effort of moving to ask the county attorney's office to get involved and get a court order to go in and private property without permission from the owner and clean up a number of parcels. There was a strategic decision made to identify a few buildings to start with, and unfortunately, COVID struck. In March of 2019, there was a judicial order from the Supreme Court of the United States, Supreme Court of the state of Georgia, that essentially limited courts to absolutely essential functions. And that limited what was occurring in the courts severely. Obviously, there were some activity, but it limited our ability to move forward with this case. Much to the credit of the Magistrate Court of DeKalb County, by 2021, the court moved to, I believe it may have been as early as 2020, 2021, the court moved to identify a way to continue addressing blight in the community by hearing in rem cases where the county files a case against property and says that the property has reached a state where it is unsafe, unsanitary, and poses a health threat, and will give permission for the county to go in and clean it up. So by 2021, June 21st specifically, we were able to file a complaint strategically targeting 2 buildings against Walden Pond. And this is after citations had been issued and work had been done by code. And the position was the county's going to have to go in and clean it up on the county's dime and get a court order saying that they have permission to do so, and then work to file a lien to recoup the cost by having a lien against the property. And as everyone knows, it was February of 2022, February 15th specifically, where Judge McNeil of the Magistrate Court signed an order, having heard from the parties and gone through a number of steps, a number of proceedings to get to the point where the court felt they'd heard enough and they had the ammunition they need to properly sign an order granting the county permission to demolish 2 buildings. In the course of those proceedings between June of 2021 and February of 2022, I understand in the field that the 2 buildings that were the subject of the litigation were in fact set ablaze and burned, or there was an accident and they were ablaze and burned. In any event, those buildings burned, but the decision from Mr. Hardy's team in the field and the decision from the county was to stay the course and make sure that even though they were burned, that the lots would be cleaned up and brought into compliance. The order having been granted in February gave the owners 30 days from the order to bring the property in compliance independent of county action. And after that, the county had permission of the court and authority of the court to then go on the property and clean those up. That occurred, and there was frankly appreciation from the community for that effort, coupled with a strong and stern reminder that it was at most a good start, and there was certainly a need to do much more. And to that end, I understand Mr. Hardy and others have taken a look at the full community, and we are in the process of analyzing what we will do to address a host of problems with other structures and other areas of the Walden Pond community generally. And we will take action to address the remaining portions in an appropriate and aggressive fashion, but obviously being very careful to make sure that we strike in a strategic fashion that will be successful. And we will not be told by the courts we haven't done all that's necessary to get a court order to move forward. What I'd like to do, with your permission, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, is explain that very brief history in terms of process and procedure, so everyone can understand what the procedure is and what the county faces. Assuming I have that permission, I'll just move forward. When code goes into
Absolutely.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes,
When code
Attorney Phillips, this is, let me say to all of us that's watching, this is not BOC meeting and I am not the chair. We are having a very candid discussion. So there is no need to ask for permission when you have been summoned. I want everyone on this call to have full disclosure and all the information that they need. Because this situation, it's very disheartening, because in many instances, our hands are somewhat tied due to legality. And unfortunately, some people, even when on the wrong side of the law, are entitled to due process of law. And around here, due process can take quite some time. That's what I would like to see different, but factor in whether it is all justified or not, COVID-19 and what we've endured. And that creates the timeline that we see here that frustrates myself and residents. So no permission needed. You have full executive privilege, Attorney Phillips. You go right ahead.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. The process generally involves an inspection by the professionals of the Code Compliance Office who are trained in identifying whether or not property is in compliance with county code. County code is based on state law. And as a general matter, what they look for is whether or not there are things like open storage of trash and debris, which I understand has been a significant problem in Walden Pond, and then problems with the structures that they find on property where the structures themselves are unsafe. And in many instances, they will make sure that an engineer's report is issued, and they carefully examine whether or not the structure is indeed unsafe from the perspective of an engineer. But procedurally, once they identify a problem, they issue a warning. They give proper notice to the owner. They typically post notice, and they make sure that the owner and interested parties such as tenants and others have notice and get an opportunity to address problems. And then they issue citations when problems are not corrected and the property remains in compliance, out of compliance. And the citations are served and delivered to the courts. And the Solicitor General assists Code Compliance by prosecuting those citations. At that juncture in the process, a court would determine whether or not a fine is appropriate, hear from the Solicitor General. The code officers from the field will serve as witnesses and often have to produce pictures and document evidence to substantiate their testimony with objective evidence. Once fines are issued and those processes are exhausted, code will ultimately make a decision when necessary to ask the county attorney's office to get involved, where we will file a complaint against the property, taking the extraordinary step of asking a court to give the county permission to go on private property without the owner's permission and demolish a building or clean up the property, or both. In the case of Walden Pond, it's been both. And that would include asking a court to give us permission to take a structure down, remove all of the debris, bring it down to grade where the grass is at an appropriate level, make sure that it's maintained properly, all on the county's dime, and then file a lien in the hopes that maybe someday that money could be recouped. Whether or not it has already been spent. That's taxpayer money. But the key to it is that it's only appropriate where there is a threat to health and safety and the quality of life in the people in the community. And in this instance, that determination is made by the professionals of code compliance. And they've assured us that there is much more work to do. I can only go so far, as you know, Commissioner and Representative, and for the public, I cannot speak about upcoming litigation or pending litigation. I've tried to limit my comments to what has already occurred and is public record because there are court documents from the judge documenting what has occurred, and it's clear and public. But we are continuing to work, and we will work that process in an expedited fashion. But most importantly for tonight, I want all of you to understand that code compliance is at the end of the process in the field. And they are sending documentation to us and working with us to identify what we will do moving forward to take advantage of any and all opportunities to clean the community up, including filing additional lawsuits where appropriate and issuing citations, but certainly not repeating the full process from beginning to end, where we can expedite and just ask a court's permission to go and clean property up. And I invite Mr. Hardy to correct me or invite me back in if I need to address any of that in his explanation of what they're doing from the code perspective in the field.
And thank you for that, Mr. Phillips, well, Attorney Phillips. And let me say that, you know, one of the frustrations we have, because again, everything is a process. And, you know, Mr. Hardy, you tell me if I'm wrong, but according to the process, when we become aware of a violation, we issue a citation. In a perfect world, of course, you're able to find very easily the party responsible. From the time they are aware of the code violation, there is a 30-day right to cure. Is that correct, Mr. Hardy?
Well, 30 days.
You're on mute.
I think I'm good now, right? Can you hear me?
You are, yes, sir.
Okay. So
And there's a 30-day right to cure.
30 days is the standard period. We can reduce that somewhat if we see fit. We can increase it with extension, but 30 days is about the average time period. But a lot of the times when we initially approach the property, there is a warning notice, and that's prior to the citation. And then the citation, on average, again, is set out about 30 days for the magistrate court. And that's the criminal process. Mr. Phillips was addressing the civil process where we go after the property itself opposed to the property owner. So just to kind of give you some context.
Understood. And, you know, I want those that are a part of this conversation to realize that if that party does not voluntarily come into compliance during that 30-day period, and Mr. Hardy, I just like 30 days. I think if anything, we should shorten time for some infractions, but hard to believe you need much more unless there's a clear and convincing and extremely compelling reason. And I'm trying to think of what that may be. If, you know, there's a requirement of a demolition, that may take a little longer because of, you know, the complexities there. But otherwise, we're going to say 30 days. And thereafter, if they do not voluntarily comply, it becomes a matter that goes on to the courts. So in the case of Walden Pond, to my knowledge, there's never been voluntary compliance. We've always had to take the long road. So now I'm going to let you talk about where you are as it relates to somewhat the history of Walden Pond and your ongoing efforts, because we're still not where we need to be in that community.
That's accurate. That actually is more than accurate as far as we're not being where we want to be in that community. With Walden Pond, as Attorney Phillips mentioned earlier, we were slated to bring a lot of those properties to the courts when the pandemic hit. What we're having to do now, after we were successful with getting orders on some of the properties, we're now having to circle back and do updated inspections on some of those properties we'd identified prior to the pandemic. And that's what we're working diligently to do now. We're going out, we're getting updated photos. We are running updated title searches. We're looking at some of the common areas as it relates to those buildings and structures that are there on site. I don't know the specific number, but I would guess we probably identified somewhere between 15 and 17 units that we deem are worthy of moving forward. So it's just a matter of getting the updated title searches and photos, sending that information to the law department. As Attorney Phillips mentioned, we're not going to start over. We're just going to start from where we were. But the law requires us to do title searches. And of course, you have to get updated photos because the properties and the areas look quite different than they did 2 years ago. So that's pretty much where we are. We're gathering the evidence that's necessary for the law department to take these properties back to the courts, get them on a docket so we can get a ruling by the judge.
And Mr. Hardy, just so we're clear, to date, and I engage anyone, and Representative Carter, feel free to come off of mute, and we are having a discussion. This, I know it is a town hall. However, this needs to be a very candid discussion. So feel free to chime in. You are a host of this with anything you have. But can either Ms. Phillips, you or Mr. Hardy, can you tell us to date how many buildings we've demolished at Walden Pond?
Yep, I have that number. Just give me a quick minute.
While Mr. Hardy pulls that number,
And
Commissioner, I'd like to offer for your benefit the fact that once the property is identified for a lawsuit where we will ask permission to demolish a building or clean up a lot, we have to file that between 45 and 15 days before a hearing. And once we file it, we have to look for the court to confirm they will hold it on that date. And if we get, just as an example, a lawyer to say, I'm going to represent an interested party, we have to run advertisement and serve all the interested parties, not just the owners. Then the court may have to continue it to make sure everyone's due process and rights are met. Because ultimately, if any step is missed and anyone has a legitimate claim that their rights were infringed in the process, we could face an appeal, which could take much longer than the normal process. And that could take easily 6 months to a year. And through that time, nothing would happen in the field unless it was voluntarily done by the owner. Mr. Hardy, I just thought I'd offer that on top of you delivering a file to get it served. There's a lengthy process once that starts. But I know the commissioner is looking for you to identify the number of buildings demolished.
It's 8. I've just researched it. I looked in our database. We've demolished 8 units so far in Walden.
Okay. So let me ask you this,
And that
because I
doesn't-
hear. Go ahead, Commissioner.
No, I was just going to say that doesn't include those that were damaged by fire,
Yes, it does.
correct?
Yeah.
Mr. Hardy?
Right. Because remember, we have to move all
Okay.
of that rubbish and debris
Mhm.
and bring it down to grade and stabilize the site. So those units are included in that 8 number.
Gotcha. So here's what would be
Okay.
helpful for me, because I understand we're talking about what kind of the finished portion of the units that you've addressed. So I would like to know how many units are currently in the process. What is the stage of the process, because, and I hear you that COVID slowed things down. I get that. But where are they in that process? And if you had to restart the inspection, at what stage are you all in the inspection? And when can we expect it to go to the attorney? And then that's from the code standpoint. And then I guess from the attorney, the ones that you have, what stage are you in? I'm very clear that we don't want to miss any steps. And I know that this isn't the only issue in DeKalb. However, this is a huge issue that's been around a long time. So I would like to know the status of that. And then the other issue that was brought up was more recently, some of the sewage and runoff that is going over into the pond. Has someone addressed that? What stage is that in? And I think I may have asked when we spoke earlier, I want to know, where does that pond go? Does that water drain to somewhere else? Does it stay there? Because the bigger issue is if that pond does have sewage and is flowing somewhere else, I want to know where it's going. I know I asked several questions. And like I said, those are the questions that we got. So I want to make sure that we get those answered.
So let me just try to work backwards, because there was a question in the chat that I answered as far as who needs to look at the sewers runoff. That would be DeKalb County Environmental Health. I also mentioned that you know, my office is happy to come out and inspect it if someone reports it to us, gives us a location, and if we need to involve environmental health to get to where we need to be from an enforcement standpoint, we'll do that. But you know, if you report it to us, we'll come out and look at it, and then we'll forward it on to environmental health. But they are the you know, identified agent for that agency for that type of inspection. As far as
so before you move off that point, so you all saying that, or I guess Commissioner, I don't know if this is a question for you, are you all saying that no one has addressed that aspect yet, or you're waiting for someone to ask your office? And I see someone did make a comment, Mr. McClinton, saying EPD has already been out. So has the county addressed that at all?
Well, I'd like to address that if I may, Commissioner.
Go ahead.
Representative Carter, I have to confess to you, I don't think the appropriate people to answer that question are on this call. What Mr. Hardy was explaining is that it's another department that would do it. And I don't know that any of us could intelligently say what they have or have not done at this juncture. But what we can definitely commit to tonight is communicating with them tomorrow to make sure, one, they are aware, and two, researching the status of whatever efforts they've already taken or will take will be, and making sure that this is addressed in an appropriate fashion, which is obviously immediately. But
Okay.
I don't know that any of us could tell you what DeKalb has done without the folks from DeKalb who would be the ones to do it.
Okay, thank you for that. I thought I had asked that question a few weeks ago, but as long as I can get an answer this week where we are with that, I appreciate it.
Sure. And I'm sorry, Mr.
And
Hardy, I
let
know we're in
me,
the middle of answering a few.
no, I think again, there's an answer in the chat that says EPD has already confirmed the raw sewage. So it looks like there's a regulatory agency that has looked at the problem. And as he mentioned, or Attorney Phillips mentioned, I don't know what their steps are from that point. But it sounds like somebody has looked at the problem and identified it as raw sewage.
Okay, so are you saying
And
that that's not something that the county needs, someone in the county needs to get involved in? Is that what you're saying?
No,
No.
I'm saying, Representative Carter, that the people in the county who would address that are not on this call. So
Got
we
it.
will reach out to them to get a status. And I heard you loud and clear. Your response to me was, you'd like to hear that this week. You think you've raised the question before. So I apologize that we don't have the answer tonight, but that's a question I want to be accurate in answering. And I just don't know that it would be fair to Mr. Hardy or the commissioner to answer that without the appropriate staff involved in the discussion. And I say that with all due respect, Commissioner, and I know, Mr. Hardy, that could be an issue that you just don't get involved in. So we need to check with the appropriate parties to see where we are and then deal with answering that question from there. With respect to some of the other issues, I did have a part of the answer because a part of it was directed to the legal process. And what I can tell you is you must have contemporaneous evidence when you file a lawsuit asking permission to go on private property and clean it up, and particularly to demolish a building. And what Mr. Hardy described about going to get updated evidence, he didn't use those terms, but the re-inspections and the like is really the process of gathering updated evidence that will be attached to complaints and used to support the county's argument when the court accepts the complaint. So we're in the process of doing that. Now, I didn't go this far, but I will explain it just so everyone's clear on how that works between the two departments. We will have to analyze all of the evidence provided by Mr. Hardy's team from the field. The photographs, we'll work with the title search. Where appropriate, we'll look at engineers' reports and make sure that the evidence is sufficient to make a prima facie case that we think could win before a judge and meet all of the legal burdens required to have a judge properly issue an order giving county permission to go in and clean up the property. That's a normal part of our process. There are times when we get a file from Mr. Hardy's office and we work the file with the court, and for whatever appropriate legal reasons, the case takes time and we get to a point where we need to bring updated evidence. And now what we have is, because of COVID, properties that were on the radar from Mr. Hardy's team are now being primed so that we can file suits through the process of gathering updated information. Is that a fair characterization, Mr. Hardy, of what you guys are doing?
That's accurate, yes.
Did we answer your questions, Representative Carter?
Of course, I started multitasking over here. I think I asked like the number of units and what stage they were in, and you did address it. So we could, because what I don't want to happen, I know you guys have a lot going on, but what I don't want to happen is, because COVID slowed us down, that if we do have to start this process over, that we get put in back of the line. So I just want to, because and I know you commissioners hearing the same thing I'm hearing. When the residents call, they're concerned. And yeah, and so I will say this, my last ask, and I know that when it comes to the properties, we have this process we have to go through, but is there the same process to just clean that area, at least that common area? Is it possible to get all that stuff, trash and all that cleaned up? Or I know it's private property, I know it's a condominium, but is that something that the county can do without a whole lot of legal back and forth?
Anytime the government is going to go on private property, there is some semblance of legal back and forth involved. That's just the reality of what we deal with. And I say this is not specific to Walden Pond or about Walden Pond, but it is an example of the dilemma. We've had residents identify what they deemed to be a pile of trash that needed to be removed, and had property owners tell us it's not trash, it's their valuable property that they don't want touched or moved. And it turned into not only an issue for an examination on whether or not it meant the property was out of compliance, but a dispute between two private parties about whether or not this stuff could be stored in that fashion at that place.
Okay.
What's jumped in one person's eyes is art or treasure in another person's eyes. So anytime the government goes on private property, it's a very touchy subject. And the issue, to be very clear, is going on private property without the owner's permission. That is a secondary issue. And with respect to Walden Pond, as Commissioner Cochran-Johnson stated, it seems that we've had no cooperation from Walden Pond in the way of trying to clean it up. So we've had to get court permission to go in and clean it up, as the government trying to make sure the community's in a safe and healthy space.
Gotcha.
And the only way I know to say it, Representative Carter, and to anyone else that's on this phone as a homeowner, I can see a mess in your yard but I don't have a legal right to come into your yard and touch anything. As it relates to Walden Pond, I hope that our judges will be harsh with them and inflict substantial punitive damages, so that hopefully moving forward, you can't force people, it appears, to be good neighbors. And these are things that they should be addressing. And for us, it is a constant battle taking them back and forth to court to get compliance on what a responsible property owner would do. So when people reach out and say, we want to go over and have a community cleanup day, if I were to say to them, you have permission, I don't have the capacity to grant the permission to enter the property, even though I may agree that there are things that, in my opinion, are blight and need to be removed. So that becomes the slippery slope there with them. And, I'm at this point also, Mr. Hardy, because I know that, again, the efforts with them are ongoing. I wish it was a quicker way to get them into the court system, because there's too much of a delay. I wish we could be more swift with them. But again, I think we really have to hammer into the judge that holds their case, the history of their delinquency. Now, as it relates to the issue of sewage, we've actually sat here now and included our COO, as well as our Director of Watershed Management, because Representative Carter, I tend to be an I-dot and T-crosser. So when you said an update, everything that I was aware of, I would have had the EPA on this conversation. I was not aware of a raw sewage issue until this was said here today, unless there's some communication that has come to me that somehow I've managed to overlook. So now I am looping in the proper individuals. And a question that I have, because reading the comments that's written here, they say that it is raw sewage levels, that sewage is flowing in. Is it flowing into Walden Pond, or is it coming from Walden Pond? Is the question. And I guess, proper people could answer that.
Yeah, now what I was told that is coming from the units, that's what from Walden Pond. So until I guess we see whatever study EPD prepare, but that's what I was told, that is coming from one of the units, and which is one of the reasons why I was concerned about where the pond flowed to, because I know that there's a couple of other creeks over that way. But like I said, we you guys, we can deal with that once we get the right folk in place.
Okay, because some of the things you hear sometimes are hard to believe. I don't know how raw sewage will flow from a unit into a creek. I pray somebody's. I pray somebody's lying. How do you route sewage from a toilet into a lake? But we'll get to the bottom of that. That's easy enough. And I did want to acknowledge too that we have State Representative Viola Davis that is present here this evening, and thank you also. So yes, and I see several people are saying, Mr. McClinton as well as Ms. Smith, that it's flowing in from Walden Pond. And whomever wrote in the comments that the EPA had confirmed this, do you have an email, or was there a name or conversation associated with the individual whom you refer to who has confirmed that there is raw sewage in that lake? If so, put that in the comments too, and that helps me move along, because I'm going straight to the individuals that you say have already been present and made this confirmation, because that's nothing. When it comes to raw sewage, that's a very serious issue. And I would find it hard to believe that the EPA would be aware and not take action. DeKalb County is currently under consent decree, and Attorney Phillips, you know what that looks like for us. There is no gray area. Health and safety is not something that the EPA waivers on. So I want to know the EPA agent that came out and is fully aware that raw sewage exists and there's been no action taken. I can't wait to figure this one out. So Mr. Clinton, I'll look forward to receiving that contact information from you, since you're aware of the person from the EPA who's come out. Okay. Mr. Hardy, now I'm going to go back to something Ms. Representative Carter had raised a question about, and that's concerning where we are now. And this
The commissioner
Did
is
you
frozen. Yeah, the commissioner has frozen, but if you could just answer the first part A of her question, we'll get part B when she comes back. What is being done now, I believe was the question.
So as Attorney Phillips mentioned earlier, we are gathering the evidence required for the filing of the cases in the magistrate court, which includes the physical evidences on site of the structures and the units, as well as the common areas or the exterior premises. And we are ordering title certificates for each of those units that'll be involved in the litigation. Once we have all of that information, then we'll forward that on to the law department. They'll match it with the units that they have in their queue, and they'll file that from that point. But that's what's being done now.
Mr. Hardy, I hate to put you on the spot, but are you saying that's been requested or it will be requested? Because
So
I guess I thought we were further along.
We have requested title certificates.
Okay.
And my team has started the collection of the physical evidence on site, meaning they're making inspections of those units, areas, buildings in Walden Pond to get current evidence, photos, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Right.
And do you know when that'll be completed? That this current process of getting photos and everything?
I would guess a week or so on the title certificates. My sense is that they've probably completed some of the collection of photos and physical evidence on some of the units, just not all of them. So certainly, I'd say in less than a couple of weeks or so, we'll have it, and then we'll forward it on to the law department.
Okay, yeah, just if you keep, I know you guys keep the commissioner up to date, but if you'll keep me in the loop of that way, as we're talking to residents, we can keep this moving. Because I guess I was hoping we were further along, but I understand everything's a little slower than usual. But if so, at least by the 10th of September, I should have an update.
An update, yes. I can't, speculate as to where we'll be, but certainly I can give you an update.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mr. Hardy, this is Allison in Commissioner Cochran-Johnson's office. I have a question for you regarding updates for the community. Do you give those to the parties that already reported the issue to you, or do you send or do you not send out any kind of updates? You just continue to go along with steps recorded. And the reason why I'm asking that is because typically our office gets asked about the status, and then we have to bug you, and then we feel bad about bugging you, but you always give us the answers. And so then we give them the answers. And so I'm wondering if we can be eliminated as the middleman. If there's somewhere where they can go to see updates, then we can start driving them there, if that's something that you have in place.
So yes, they can contact our office as they do when they initially report the violations, unless they report it through your office. But they can always contact our office directly. Our 311 operators answers the calls. they'll put that request in, and then my back office folks will research the status and then communicate that with them. Probably the best way to do it is via email, but if they feel more comfortable with a phone call, we can provide them updates. But just to give you some idea of the number, we get close to 800 complaints a month. So we can't give everybody the update that they may want when they want it. So we rely on you guys, meaning the commissioner's office or their constituents, to call in and ask for those updates. And
Okay.
then we try to accommodate you that way.
So,
Got
Mr. Hardy, let me ask you this, and I get it. I promise I understand that you guys get a lot of requests. I get it. I really do. But is it possible we could create maybe a special task group for this particular area? Because as you see in the chat, and I think this is what was concerning me when they reached out to us, that this has been going on since the early 2000s. Is it possible that we could get some type of special task that could keep us updated as well as address these issues over in the Walden Pond area? Is something like that possible?
I would say possible, just not probable in this environment. And it's just all about staffing, as other agencies in the county, we've experienced our great resignation as well. And I will tell you, this is the kind of special attention that we give to Walden Pond, the other communities with these type of meetings. This is not a typical question answer session we have for any other code violation. When it reaches this level or the level of concern, then we start having meetings. This is not the first. I'm sure it won't be the last. I know this is one of many meetings that I've participated in regarding Walden Pond, and I imagine the commissioner and Attorney Phillips could say the same. So yeah, we try to be as accommodating as we can when we get those requests for updates.
And Mr. Hardy, let me say to you, I have found that you keep me in the loop, when you go out, whether you're doing code compliance sweeps, I'd like to say that we have one of the better relationships. I know what's going on, and that's because you tell me. As these cases go before judges, if you will just make a mental note to always send me any updates concerning Walden Pond, I will push them along to our list, because in our office, we have, the emails that are associated strictly with Walden Pond, individuals that have reached out. And of course, Representative Carter, as well as Representative Davis, I will include you on those communications so that you are aware of exactly what we know when we know it. I apologize for going out. But one other question that I have, Mr. Hardy, because I noticed you said that, as it relates to ongoing compliance issues, there's several buildings that are we seeking at this time to demolish additional buildings? Are you all at liberty to disclose that to us?
All of the units I've identified in Walden Pond, I said we've identified in Walden Pond, there are on our list to be requested for demolition. So now, the court has a final decision in that, but none of them are on what we call the abatement list. They're all on the demolition list.
Demolition list. Okay. So basically, we are seeking to demolish the entire community, correct?
Not the entire community, just the number of units that we've identified so far. I mean, and conceivably, I guess, when you talk about down the road, we could, eventually get to the entire community. But right now, we're not seeking demolition of the entire community. We haven't, gathered that level of evidence on the entire community.
Understood. And I see there was a question from Representative Davis concerning Walden Pond and whether or not they have a delinquent water bill. I do believe that there is a delinquent water bill. I believe that they have made a payment arrangement associated with it. We have passed that along as a part of public knowledge as we've sought to bring folk into compliance that have not been. You can't punish the residents because that creates an unhealthy living environment already in a questionable environment if we were to shut off water. So that we have not done, but we continue to work with them and they do have a payment plan.
Now that brings another question, because these are condominiums and normally under normal condominiums, the condo association handles the water bill. So if that is the case, does that mean we have a contact person over at Walden Pond, or are they being individually billed for the water?
Walden Pond is billed as a unit.
Okay,
And it is not unusual. It's unfortunate, but not unusual for property owners and property management to receive compensation for residents and simply not pay the bill.
well, that's not
And
my
that
question. What I
compound-
was asking was, if someone's negotiating, then that means that we have a contact person over there for the association.
Yes, we never said we didn't. We
not saying
said they've
that.
been
I
non-responsive
know.
to
I'm
us.
asking
Mhm.
because it's knowledge for me, and we could talk
Mhm.
offline. But I'm just asking because I didn't know that there was someone actively manage the association, which is different than the people who own the property. I just didn't know that.
And let me step backwards because what you've just said is different from what I said. I
Okay.
didn't say that we negotiate with an association. We go strictly to the owners when we are having conversations, those individuals who are duly responsible and their legal affiliates for negotiating with the county and having conversation. An HOA doesn't negotiate with us on the payment or creation of a payment schedule for delinquent water bills. That's not what the HOA does. Again, when we have legal issues, we go to, and Mr. Hardy, perhaps you can speak more to that. The owners of record are who we have those conversations with.
That's correct. We haven't had any meaningful contact or conversations with any HOA or HOA representative.
Okay, and I'm only speaking in reference to the water bill.
If I may, Representative Carter, we have to be careful here. There are a couple of nuances I want to point out that could be impacting our discussion right now.
Okay.
A water bill may be obtained from a party that is not the owner. That's just a possibility. So I can't speak to the water bill at Walden Pond. I just want to point that nuance out because we have to be careful about mixing that discussion with the discussion of an in-rem lawsuit that would require the identity of the owner and other interested parties.
Yes.
So there are a number of folks that could be identified in the process of an in-rem lawsuit or could be a party to an issue on a water bill. It doesn't mean they're the same parties. There are a host of nuances that could dictate who we're dealing with given the circumstance. And we just have to be careful. We're having two separate conversations. And I heard your question. And I appreciate the fact that you invited the commissioner to even speak with you offline. I just think that may be appropriate given your question about whether or not there's a representative for the Walden Pond condominium discussing a water bill to the Walden Pond condominium.
Yes, sir.
Walden Pond condo has a water bill. Maybe others do. I don't. I don't know that there's a representative there. There may be owners who have spoken up about a bill to the condo association and worked out a payment arrangement in an effort to keep getting water. There are any number of possibilities. And I don't want to speak about hypothets. I just wanted to clarify, this is a very complex conversation with a host of legal nuance. We're talking about two different avenues, and we've got to be really careful. And I say that with all due respect, obviously, but I just want to protect everyone involved.
No, thank you, because you definitely cleared up where the mix-up was. And so those are all my questions, because I think anything else that we need to discuss, we're going to have to get more information and maybe reconvene at another time, or communicate some of the findings of the things that we can share, as well as maybe some other things we could discuss, how to address similar issues going forward.
I'd like to offer one other thing that is a general comment about the nature of the questions on status. It's my understanding that we are all going to work in an expedited fashion to address these issues on behalf of the DeKalb County government. And when I say we, I mean the various tentacles involved, from the code compliance team to the state people who work in the courts, to the magistrate court, which is county, to the solicitor general, which is county, obviously the law department. And with all due respect, I'll just tell you that the governing authority for DeKalb County government, including Commissioner Cochran-Johnson and CEO Michael Thurman and all the other commissioners, have been very clear that these kinds of problems warrant immediate and direct attention. And they're not going to tolerate anything less from the Tim Hardys and Terry Phillips of the staff. And Commissioner, I say that with all due respect to you publicly, but I want your constituents to know that you and the others leading this county push us to make sure these things are addressed in an expedited fashion. Unfortunately, it is a complex, difficult legal process, and we have to work within the process, and we have to be very careful to respect everyone's rights. But clearly we have a problem, and we're working feverishly to address it, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you.
And let me say that, I really understand the comments, concerning action, because I wouldn't want it next door to my home. I still remember how I felt when I saw this facility. And, we have had conversation on, the relocation of everyone within the facility, but there are some who want to remain. So it is an ongoing discussion. I don't want to say too much there, because we do have individuals on staff who continue to work with the residents as it relates to ongoing housing and housing relocation, and bringing these people into compliance, because it continues and remains to be private property, and bringing them up to code is all I'm concerned with, and doing that as expeditiously as we can, while still giving them due process of law. But again, Mr. Hardy, hoping that when they do reach the judge's bench, that the judges are all familiar with the history of this location and are very swift with justice and punitive with them for what folk are having to experience, as we wait for them to do what any reasonable and prudent person should. So I see a question here. Can something be done about the majority absentee owner who owns almost like 30 units? Mr. McClinton, we can't control who owns the property. We can only seek to have them keep the property in a state of good repair according to the codes of DeKalb County, Georgia. So whatever those units are, if they're not in compliance, then that's where Mr. Hardy comes in. We issue citations. We ask that the issue is remediated within, I want to say, that 30-day period. If it isn't, we then issue a court citation, and the court must then take over the matter for forced compliance. But no, unfortunately, there is nothing that we can do about the absentee owner and the units that he owns. There's absolutely nothing the county can do about it. And Liz, I see you stated if anyone is renting their condo out to others, then the rent should be collected by the county and used to make the property inhabitable. The county is not honestly in the business of real estate. That's not what we do. We provide essential services, water, sewer, sanitation, roads and drainage, public safety. But unfortunately, we can't receive their rent. But we do have an obligation to do our part to ensure that the property is kept to a proper standard. So again, that's where we come in on the code compliance side. I will not say that, there's a statement here, Brandon Hill is also a condominium. It seems like condos need to be better regulated. I will say personally, since coming on board in 2019, you don't get a Brandon Hill and you don't get a Walden Pond in 5 years. You don't get one in 10 years. The degradation that you see there and the dilapidation of the property takes, honestly, in my opinion, decades. So I will say that if, we have stronger code enforcement, a property shouldn't get to this point would be the goal. So at some point, I do believe that there has been omissions. And I'm not here to say on whose watch that occurred. So Mr. Hardy, you and I came online at literally the same time. But for the sins of the father, there's a lot of things I see that wouldn't occur. I'm not sure how many citations have been issued thus far. Mr. Hardy, I'm not sure if you have a running tally. I know there's been many, but I will defer to you if you can answer Ms. Martin's question as to how many citations has been issued.
If we're referring to Walden Pond, we're well past citation from a criminal standpoint. That's why we've sent those files to the law department to bring action against the property itself. I mean, back in years before I got here, it was my understanding that there was always some enforcement action out at Walden Pond as it relates to criminal citations against property owners. That's why we've escalated this to the interim abatement process. So we're not chasing the property owner, we're going after the property itself.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Coles, I don't want you confused by my statement as to the services that the county provides, water, roads and drainage, sewer. When you build a property, this home that I sit in, I'm now responsible for my water and sewer. If there is an issue with my pipes that's on my property, that's my responsibility. So the county is not responsible for the roads that lead to Walden Pond, nor for their sewer issues. They are, but when we are aware that there is an issue with either, then that's where, again, code compliance can step in and ask that any issue is remediated. And I would agree that they should not receive a dime of rent. Liz, I think that's you who wrote that. I would agree until that property is brought up to standard. But at this time, it continues to be an ongoing issue of litigation. And again, Mr. Quaves, that's as it relates to the penalties for being non-compliant for years and decades, it all comes down to one word, the judge. And that's why I've said here tonight that I would hope that when they reach a judge's bench, that the judge pays careful attention to the history here so that they are punished to a point that compliance becomes easier than the consequences of justice. And with that said, we had a hard stop at 7:15. I don't feel we've solved the problem. We had a conversation about it, but we are far from solving the issue. And, Mr. Hardy, one of the things that you've done for me over the years, as we've dealt with certain communities and certain issues, you have always kept me abreast of when it was going before a judge, because I know that you have to show up in court. So as it relates to Walden Pond, when it is, when they are going before court, if you will also make me aware so I can share it with the community. Because you and I both know that when the community has shown up in force, it does have an impact on the judge and how they respond. So I do want everyone, because there's neighboring communities that, I receive emails who express concern. I want everyone to have full access to all information, so that if they desire to be present, then they have that capacity to show up in court. And I'm not sure if the judge will allow them to speak, but of course, you being there, you can make the judge aware that we have several members of the community who are impacted by the condition in which the property is kept, so that they understand the impact that this is having on people. Okay. And at this time, Representative Carter, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can, bring us to a close and ask or, make any closing statements that you may have at this
I want to
time.
say thank you, Attorney Phillips. I know you're working diligently over there, Mr. Hardy. I know you're working. I know your team is working, and we appreciate all that you've done to this point. And with Walden Pond, we would hope that as we continue this process, that you will keep us abreast. I'm still going to push for that task force for Walden Pond. And those of you who have made various comments in the chat, I've taken note of those. And as I look at where we are, I'm also looking at how do we address some of these concerns that you are having. So when we go back in session in January, that if there's an opportunity to provide the legal department a little more leverage to be able to do what they need to do. So, so again, thank you guys. This definitely will not be the last time. I put my email and number in the chat so that if you're not in communication with me, you can do that. And as we get updates, we'll share those updates. And as we can move this process, we will move this process. So thank you, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson. Thank you for your diligence. That all that you were already doing. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you pulling these guys together, and those other issues that were brought up. We will get answers to those, and we will share that information. So thank you guys for joining us this evening.
No, thank you. And Mr.
thank
Hardy,
your
Mr.
staff.
Phillips, thank you.
The staff did an amazing job too. We appreciate you all for helping us pull this together.
Yes, I have the best team in DeKalb County, and I take no qualms with saying that as often as possible. Thanks to Leah and Allison and JP, who isn't with us this evening, but he's out there busy doing something. So thanks to you for joining us and staying with us for this time, and have a good evening. I continue to be available, and I will continue to do everything that I can to keep you abreast of the issues surrounding Walden Pond. And I look forward to having this matter brought to a close in the near future, using every tool at our disposal, Mr. Hardy, and being as harsh as we can through the legal system, so that we send a message that not in my DeKalb, we will not tolerate this. Right. Because it's just gone on too long, and it makes the community lose faith in us. So to everyone here, I truly, sincerely feel what you're feeling, and I understand. And it's just not enough that can be said about how long this has taken to be rectified, and it's still not. So have a good evening, and I'll continue to keep you all on a short list, and Mr. Hardy, keep me abreast of every issue so that I can definitely speak with the community frequently and all stakeholders here.
I will.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.